option. Pitch. Didn't get it. They stumped him. Victory formation in the Apple Cup takes a knee. The clock will do the rest.
Brutal loss for Washington State University this weekend, visiting North Texas. 59-10 is the final score. It was 42-3 after the end of the first half. We're going to get into it. Our thoughts, talk about, where this team heads moving forward. Obviously, the Apple Cup is this coming weekend. We have on Adam Lewis in this episode to talk through his thoughts on where the team currently stands. And he had this tweet that this potentially is the worst loss in WSU
literally
history.
ever.
Literally ever. So we'll get into it and much more with Adam Lewis. But first off, this episode is brought to you by CougFan.com. Make sure to check out CougFan, subscribe to their premium membership for all things WSU athletics. They're our go-to source for all things Cougar football and more. And if you didn't already know, I am a mortgage lender full-time when I'm not making these podcasts. Make sure to reach out to myself. I'll have a link in the description of this video. Interest rates are dropping, and now is a great time to buy a house. Now is a great time to refinance if you're up there in the sevens somewhere. So make sure to reach out. Washington, Oregon, California, Idaho, or Arizona. And Dylan, how can people get in contact with you?
Yeah, looking to lock in an energy rate is always a great idea. Give me a call or a email at either of those destinations.
Cougs helping Cougs. And I do have to mention, check out Old Crimson Lager, support the Cougar Collective, join the 1890 Club, $18.90 a month, help keep the players in Pullman. And you might just be seeing some Old Crimson Lager. Well, it's not on the official list, I don't think, but beer sales are now going to be happening in Martin Stadium this weekend at the Apple Cup. So that's exciting to see. But yeah, let's get into it. So initial thoughts, 59-10 at North Texas. I guess first off, I have to say, give credit to where credit is due. North Texas seems to be a solid team. We didn't give credit to Idaho like we should have in the first episode. That was our fault for making it close. North Texas is a solid team. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Obviously, Eric Morris was the head coach. He had some ties to Washington State. They dominated this game. Dylan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, they're a solid team, but that should never happen. That should never happen. 59-10? You're kidding me. Nobody was ready to play. Nobody was ready to play on Saturday. I mean, my girlfriend's an Eagles fan. When they're losing by 14 plus, she stops watching. I'm just sitting there watching the game 42-3. And she's like looking at me like, seriously, do you really need to do this? I go, yeah, unfortunately I do. Saw three quarterbacks in the game. Jackson Potter, obviously he made some bad decisions. He turned the football over 3 times. The defense was put in horrible situations. It seemed time after time after time. North Texas was starting inside the Coug territory, whether it was an interception return into the red zone, punt looked atrocious again. I just don't understand how the special teams unit can look this bad on punt. You get out absolutely outmanned, outclassed, outcoached, the whole 9 yards. I mean, everything. I mean, this should be a serious wake-up call for everybody. Players, coaches, staff, GMs, everybody. Like this needs to not happen again. They open up as 20.5-point dogs this week to UW. I don't know how they cover that. Really? After watching that last weekend, I don't know how you can willfully put your money on the Cougs to cover this weekend. I hope they prove me wrong. Second half, we saw Zevi Eckhouse come into the game, had engineered their only scoring drive, missed a few intermediate throws to a couple wide open receivers. And that's what Coach Rogers has talked about with Zevi. It hasn't been his command of the offense. That's great. Checks, making sure everybody is where they need to be, controlling the offense. Zevi can handle that. I guess it's just the turnovers, missing open guys. I didn't expect this year to be the year where we're breaking in a quarterback. I thought this was going to be Zevi's team. And personally, if he doesn't start the Apple Cup this week, I think that's a serious issue and mistake, I should say. Give Zevi the keys to start this game. Let's see what he's got from a senior leadership standpoint. Also, this is the Apple Cup. This is the game we're circling on our schedule. He deserves it. He deserves this game after the first 3 weeks. No doubt about it. 100% in my mind. Zevi Eckhouse deserves this game, and it should be his to start with. If Potter needs to come in because he's not playing, well, then so be it. Bring him in. But Zevi Eckhouse, he needs to start the game.
Yeah, WC was dominated all game. 5 total turnovers, all in the first half. Again, 42-3 when they're heading into the locker room at the end of the first half. You know, in Jimmy's presser, which we'll play later on in the interview that we have, he talks about there were certain decisions. So Washington State is running an RPO offense to where RPO is involved, and there were certain reads and decisions that were made by Jackson Potter to where he should have handed off the ball. There's growth that needs to be had there, and you can't continue to be put out there when you're making these types of reads and throws.
Yeah, it's tough to have an open quarterback competition in week 4 of your season. I mean, let's be real here. It's just not ideal. It's not where you want to be. And I really don't see a lot of other Division I teams dealing with this right now. You know, the one thing too, with it being Apple Cup week, you know, with Jimmy's presser on Monday, you want to see how he reacts to some of the Apple Cup questions. You know, how important is this week as a head coach? How does he answer that question? Shout out to former WSU club ball player Austin Getz, and a Murrow graduate, with the question here.
Being new to this rivalry, how do you immerse yourself in it and the players that are new to it as well?
Yeah, I think every time you play a rivalry game, it's emotional. I try to take myself out of the emotion of it because I don't know if that's the clearest way to think as a coach. My approach to the games really don't change. The preparation can't change as much as you want one more than the other, right? I think that if you don't want them all the same, you're leaving something to chance. But I know how important it is to the alum, and I know how important it is to the state for Washington State as far as this game. I've heard it since I've gotten here, and we're not taking them lightly. We need to prepare and go out and execute and play it at a really high level because we're deserving to play at a really high level. Regardless of who we're playing at, we got to earn it, and we got to earn it right now. And the prep has to start today as far as how we get ourselves in the right position to have success to make a run at this. So will it be pretty? I don't know if any game is pretty when you play great teams. You just need to find a way, and that's what we got to do this week. We got to find a way.
It's a good point that you have to train for each game like it's just any other game. You can't look at it as like this big thing to where you play differently. It's like you got to go out there and compete. The positive is that it is in Pullman this year. It's at Martin Stadium. This is going to be the first weekend that Martin Stadium will have beer sales in the general areas. So stay in the stadium the entire game. It's sold out. It's a sold out game. There's no beer garden out there on the practice field. You can't leave and come back in. There's no re-entry. Pack the place. Make it the environment that it should be for the Apple Cup. And you know, we talk later in this episode on does the Apple Cup even matter anymore? Shout out to Connor Reef for the viewer question. I mean, you know, we have to. It means a lot to us. Obviously, does it mean as much to UW? Well, if it doesn't mean as much to them, then they're coming into it with the mindset that this is just, you know, it's just Washington.
They're going to roll.
So
yeah,
let's win.
I'd rather them have that mindset. And I don't think they're going to have that mindset this year. I just think Jed Fish last season did not expect to lose that game and lost it. I think he would probably tell us if we asked him if you could handle the Apple Cup week differently than you did last year. Probably would say yes. I feel like Jonah Coleman has a lot on his mind as well coming into this game. You also have Buda Alukta, who transferred from WSU, our starting middle linebacker last year, is now at UW. So there are some things, some storylines, some narratives this week with this Apple Cup. But I think the biggest narrative is where we go with an offensive identity, because there's really none right now. And we talked to Adam Lewis about this later on in this episode. Is like, what is the identity? Have we seen any? What's the future identity? Can this offense get going? So this is going to be a big week for Danny Freund and the offense to come out and put together a game plan and be able to just drive the football, hold on to the ball. Adam says this later in the episode. The line play for UW is already far and away better than what they had last year. They rebuilt their offensive line and their defensive line, because you got to be able to handle Michigan, Ohio State, Oregon. I mean, it's a daunting schedule with the half-share Huskies in the Big Ten. Can they keep this close? That's the question. Can you get into the second half with it still being a 1-2 possession game? It's going to be exciting also to see what Jimmy Rogers' game plan is going to be defensively speaking. I think where WSU kind of hangs their hat defensively speaking so far throughout this season has been the secondary, obviously with some play from Anthony Polano in the first couple games. Hope to have Polano for the Apple Cup. Jimmy Rogers yesterday in his press conference basically said, hey, look, if he gets cleared by the trainers, he's going to play. It's looking like it's a day-by-day situation. Going to need to follow Jamie Vinnick and CougFan.com for up-to-the-minute updates for injuries and if guys are practicing and whatnot. So, yeah, great. I've got a wedding on Saturday. One of my best friends is getting married. Perfect timing. I can just check the phone. 7-point game. All right, let's go to the bar. Let's get this Apple Cup on right now.
I want to see Dylan rage dancing on the dance floor. Like, what does that look like?
It looks pretty. I'll tell you that. You get a few brewskis,
a few old Crimson Lagers,
a few old Crimson Lagers. Maybe a shot of Fireball, maybe 2. We'll get that night going.
A little tail of the tape. So Washington is currently favored 20.5-point favorites. The over-under is 52.5 at the moment. And, Washington is coming in with a serious offense at quarterback. You got Damon Williams, who we saw flashes of last year in the Apple Cup. They should have had him running that option on the last play, but thankfully
to the other side of the field.
And then there's running back Jonah Coleman, who is, I've seen on Heisman watch lists. He's a serious guy. As Jimmy said in his press conference this week, Washington has really 2 NFL-ready running backs that are ready to go in the 1 and 2. And then you also have Denzel Boston, who is 6'4", 209 at the wide receiver. Obviously, thinking back to Rome Odunze, came from UW. That was a serious guy. It's going to be a true test, obviously, for Washington State and their defense. We've loved what we've seen from their defense until this game. I mean, we get into it also that, the defense was put in such bad position throughout the game at North Texas. You got to take it with a grain of salt. That was on the offense. So it'll be a true test for Washington State. And if they can keep it close, that's the real question.
You take a look at their 3 main ball carriers on the ground and their yards per carry. You start off with Jonah Coleman, 7.8 yards per carry. And then you have your dual threat quarterback, Damon Williams, 6.3 yards per carry. And then Muhammad at 5.7 yards per carry. And then you know what? Hey, also, let's get the third string running back in there, Jordan Washington, 4.8 yards per carry. So it is a stout rushing attack. And if we are seeing Jordan Washington run the football at any point during this football game, it probably means that they're down 3 or 4 possessions. So
before we get into the interviews that we have here, make sure to reach out, leave us a voicemail, send us an email, your thoughts, questions, opinions. You might just hear your voicemail in a future episode. You can email us at thecouchgmpnw@gmail.com, or you can send a voicemail. Goes directly to voicemail, 503-388-6044. And with that, let's get into our interviews.
Well, folks, this week we don't have a former football player to talk to. Sorry, MK fans, but we do have a special guest, a former Coug fan beat writer, Adam Lewis, also spent time covering sports for the Seattle PI, graduated from WSU in 2013, a proud Edward R. Murrow College of Communication graduate, currently lives in Seattle and works in the tech industry. Adam, we are coming off a 59-10 loss to North Texas. And I'll tell you this, I had quite a few Coug friends that took the Cougs money line this past weekend and looked like some fools doing it. First off, where do we go from here after a 59-10 loss? And now we are in the heart of the Apple Cup week.
Yeah, I bought the hook. I was at 6.5. I thought, I can get 7. I felt really good going into the game against North Texas. And obviously was proven wrong pretty quickly that regrets on gambling on that one. But where do we go from here? That's a great question. I think right now, WSU is in a really vulnerable place, to be honest. We're 2-1, which feels, you just look at that, you feel okay, but then you dive in a little deeper. Against Idaho, we looked basically like an FCS team. And then against San Diego State, a little comeback, felt good. And then obviously 59-10 on Saturday. So I don't know where we go from here. We don't have an identity really on offense. I felt good about the defense going into the North Texas game, and it's pretty clear that depth-wise, we're in a little bit of trouble at the linebacker position. And Eric Morris, you saw like what we saw with Mike Leach teams when you have a vulnerability in the middle of the field. I don't want to call it Jack Ellison, but basically a freshman starting his first road game. Looked like he had never seen a crossing route, unfortunately, and they just went at him over and over and over and over. So I'm not feeling good going to the Apple Cup. But yeah, we'll see what Jimmy can cook up for week 4.
And one point is, of course, where the Cougs were turning over the ball was putting the defense in such a bad position that, it's basically, red zone situations, drive after drive.
Pick six into the red zone, interception in the red zone. Yeah, there was some very vulnerable spots on the field for them to be starting field position. So, Rodgers talked about that in his press conference. But at the end of the day, too, 59-10 is 59-10.
Right.
59-10 is 59-10. That is a great way to look at it, because I wish there was a little bit more fight out of the South Dakota State boys on the back end defensively. But like you said, Connor, when you're put up in that position time and time again, it is very easy, obviously, to give in. And they weren't really given much a chance. I think 28 points off of turnovers. Jackson Potter obviously, took a real step back, and that's why Jimmy's opened up the competition this week. So yeah, it's only going to get harder from here, I guess, is my big concern. We have the Apple Cup this week at Colorado State, who played UW tough for 3 quarters before the worst. I don't know if it was a fake punt, I don't know if you guys
fake field goal. It was
the worst. I don't know what it was that they called. And so, they're not bad. And then, you got Ole Miss and Virginia. So
Toledo is not bad either. That's not an easy home game. Toledo is one of the better MAC schools.
Yeah, James Madison too, aren't they? Fairly respectable.
Yeah, they're not bad either.
So yeah, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. I would just this week like to see the competitive edge that we saw in the San Diego State game, again from the defense. I mean, even if we it's sad to go into your rivalry game saying oh, I just want it to be competitive, but that's kind of where I'm at. I don't know how you guys feel.
Looking at it, 20.5. I mean, gosh, I don't know how you are a Sharp or somebody else and are looking at that and saying, I don't know. How did they not lose by 30 this week? I mean, that's obviously me being glass half empty here, but we also need to get into the quarterback aspect. And we are in a open competition going into week 4 of the season. And it's just not where you want to be as a first-year head coach and program right now.
Yeah, open competition going into the rivalry week and rivalry game in week 4 is just saying it out loud is depressing in some ways. I mean, what was fall camp for? If you're going to do this, the way I've been pretty critical about the way the QB competition has been handled since the beginning. Obviously, I'm not there every day in practice like beat writers like Jamie Vinnick and Greg Woods, but it seemed like everything I was reading out of fall camp was Zevi was playing pretty well. And I can kind of, if I get in Rodgers' shoes, and really think about it, I'm okay, I can kind of see why you went with Potter just because of the arm strength and ability to push the ball down the field. And I do, I guess, somewhat understand it. But for me, I would want Potter to be so much better than Zevi to win the job. And it seems like they were pretty close. And now you have it where 2 times in 3 games, the guy you went with, you kind of went out on a limb taking, honestly. In Potter, you pulled him from the game. The guy who's not making the most money in that quarterback room, if we're going to be, not my place to say, but we paid Zevi obviously to stick around, right? He went in the transfer portal last year. So we saw what he could do last year in the Holiday Bowl. And, I think the overwhelming feeling among fans right now is that they'd like to see him take a, be given a shot at this. So,
and just going through Zevi's background a little bit, at 3 years at FCS Bryant, he had 2,300 passing yards his first year, a 21 touchdown to 3 interception ratio. Second year was 3,200 passing yards, 26-15. His final year at FCS Bryant in 2023, 2,900 passing yards, 28 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. And then last year we saw what he did in the Holiday Bowl. So this is a guy that has obviously the most experience. He has shown that he can throw the ball. The thought was that Potter can mitigate the turnovers and the sacks and all of these things better than him. But now it comes to think like the thought of how much of his thought process in deciding on Jackson Potter was thinking forward to the future. Whereas, Jackson Potter has another 2 years that he could be starting versus Zevi just 1 year. And then you have all these guys transferring out. If that happens, what's your thought process with maybe trying to manage the transfer portal?
Yeah, I've thought about this too. And in the old college football where we weren't losing guys every year to the portal, I would get that. Like, okay, if they're close, go with the younger guy. But if Potter would have balled out completely, then he's gone most likely.
See ya.
Well, why not play the 24-year-old with a ton of experience who the locker room, really likes and can rally around, and who's honestly, I think, I'm not a football coach, but he seems better suited to run like the RPO stuff that they want to run.
And Jackson, yeah.
Than Jackson. And I think Jackson, he does have a bright future as a quarterback. I mean, he needs to get a little bit better at reading coverages. But for me, I'm like, just play the senior. I feel like Jimmy has just kind of overthought it, honestly.
Well, and the other thing too is just like, okay, we got that Julian was the backup week 1, just based off of him coming in on a few different plays, and obviously coming in after the turnover that the Cougs forced inside the red zone. It just, and you agree here, it just doesn't seem like, what are these situations they're putting Duggar into? It's not fair to him. It's not fair to the team. Botch snaps. He just does not look ready for even small packages right now.
No, and I don't want to pile on the kid, but yeah, the usage has been very, very confusing to say the least. I think it was in the Idaho game where they put him in right after a turnover, where we, were set up in their red zone, and that obviously didn't go very well.
And
although he was pretty close to shoestring tackle, but his process, he looks like a little bit like a deer in the headlights. Like, he's not going through reads at all. He's patting the ball. I think Jimmy said it in the press conference yesterday. It was like the way he described Duggar was like, these are very basic quarterback skills. Like, he's got to be able to process reads and not pat the ball and not take off immediately, which is kind of your first job as a quarterback. So
it kind of looks like Connor when he's playing college football 25. He just does not look at his first read. He's just running.
Yeah, he's looking at the line immediately. He's worried about the tackle holding up, and he's ready to get out of there.
I do want to play Jimmy's presser talking about the quarterback competition.
Those are things that we'll learn through with a young quarterback, and he needs to continue to grow and chomp at the bit to compete for the spot this week, because that's what it will be. And so I know that's probably the next question that you'll ask is who's going to play a quarterback. I got to make an assessment off of who's progressing the right way throughout the season. And right now it will be open this week.
So is it open competition?
Yes, it is.
Okay. What do you want to see? Well, first, is it just going to be him, Zevi, and Julian on that? Okay. Yeah. What do you want to see out of those 3 guys, and what's that going to be like?
Well, Julian's got to progress his decision-making process as far as not just premeditating his throws. He knows this. And then I got to get off of a certain read, right? I got to get off the read, and I got to get to the next check without patting the ball and then looking to scramble right away when it's not really there. Zevi, obviously, some of the decisions there, he's got to hit those open throws. For him, that's kind of been the thing. But as far as his command of the offense, it's there. His leadership is there. His work ethic is there. And he gives us a little bit of flexibility with his feet. Is it elite twitch? And it's not. It doesn't need to be either. He's got to create something when something's not there. And then Potter has to improve decision-making. He has done a great job in the 2 games, right, of putting the ball in tight windows. But at some point, you got to be able to see the coverage He missed some open throws, and he's got to grow. Right, he's a young quarterback that's going through it for the first time, and the reality is the situation that we're in, and I don't want to look at this whole thing constantly as a rebuild. That we got to have success to rebuild, and for me, it's about winning right now and being in the present, and we got to grow offensively significantly because we got to make sure that we can put up some points. Right, you have 5 turnovers in one half. It's hard to win. Because the game ran away from us in the second quarter there, just with poor play. Was it anything that they did? They played hard. They were physical. They made plays, and they were, opportunistic about like the opportunities that came their way.
Well, a lot to unpack there. He obviously said what we just talked about with Duggar. I guess going forward, Zevi did have the only touchdown scoring drive. Granted, it was at the end of the game. Obviously, backups are all in this. He did miss a few intermediate throws while he was in the game, but I just felt like there was a different energy with him. Obviously, he's better in the RPO. He's not going to, wow you with his legs, but he can do a little. He can extend a play. I just don't think Duggar is in serious consideration for this. I think it needs to be Zevi. It's the Apple Cup week. Give him the start. Let's see how it looks in the first couple drives, and then you can make a decision from there. But that's how I'm feeling going into the Apple Cup.
And apparently Johnny wasn't even suited up for the game, so I assume that he's already kind of out the door. He's the 4th on the depth chart.
Yeah, I would be shocked if it isn't Zevi at this point. I don't know if you guys noticed, but they didn't make Potter available after the game against North Texas, and they didn't show him on the sideline at all. And so I wonder how he reacted a little bit to that news of getting pulled after throwing 3 picks in the first half. So I would be shocked if it wasn't Zevi at this point, but they just got to pick a guy and go with him. Like, you got to be high conviction, when you make a big decision like this, and pulling Potter twice in the first 3 games, like, obviously you're not fully ready to ride with him. And the fact that most of the fan base wants Zevi anyways, like, let's ride with him, see if he can spark the offense, because we're not really doing anything well right now on offense. We're not running the ball especially well. We don't have much of a downfield.
6th worst in the nation.
6th worst in the nation. We're not really able to stretch the field. And I thought, I know Zevi was in against probably North Texas's 2nd or 3rd string guys, and he overthrew. I don't know, what was it, late in the 4th quarter? He threw a deep ball kind of off his back foot, but it went like 55 yards in the air. And I thought that was like the big concern with him, was like he didn't have a deep ball. I was like, he overthrew him, but it wasn't a bad throw. He overled him by maybe a few feet. So yeah, I mean, I was clamoring after week 1 for him. I liked him last year, obviously in the Holiday Bowl when he came in, and he didn't like really push Mateer, but like there was a decent competition last year in fall camp. So I feel like it's just like his time, and let's just roll with him and stick with him,
So we definitely want to get to the Apple Cup, and we don't want to keep piling on. We've been very optimistic on this podcast leading up to this point, but obviously after this week, there's not much to be optimistic about. Dylan, what were you going to say something first?
I do want to play just a 17-second clip on identity, because we're still looking for the offensive identity. And I found this, important.
Identity wise on offense, like I said before, I have a mindset of what I'd like to be. Are we ready to be that right now in the course of the season? We have to adjust. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for answers right now as far as where we can have success and what our players are the best at.
And I'll give Jimmy credit. I mean, last week or 2 weeks ago against San Diego State, 42 passing attempts, the most ever in his college career, over 30 games, coached, 40 games coached. So he is obviously trying to win. He's trying to do what he can in terms of, can't be a smash mouth football running team when you can't run the football. Okay, so I guess we'll let Jackson throw the dart around 40 times a game, but is Danny Freund a little bit in over his head in terms of where this scheme is Or is it just more so, hey, there's 75 new players and a lot of these guys might be FCS level guys?
Yeah, I think so far they clearly don't have an identity, as Jimmy said. And after 3 games, I don't want to be like, oh, Danny Freund like doesn't know what he's doing. Obviously, they're searching. I mean, after the San Diego State game, you're like, okay, we were spreading the ball around, getting it to different receivers and passing to set up the run. And you're like, okay, like maybe that's a way forward for the offense. And then obviously North Texas just got undone by, really, really bad turnovers. So, the jury's still out on Freund. I mean, he didn't call plays last year, right? He took a year off. So, and then before that was at North Dakota. It's obviously a big step up in competition going from FCS to FBS level. And, Jimmy brought like their staff overall is very short on guys with FBS experience, which gives me a lot of worry as somebody who lived through the Wolf years and was in school at that time when Paul Wolf came over from Eastern Washington. He brought pretty much all of that FBS staff, and it was evident during that time that he was still recruiting some guys who were frankly not ready to play in the what was then the Pac-10 at that time. So with Freund, I think this week in the Apple Cup, like let's see if he can scheme it up. Like I want to see trick plays. I want to, you got to get creative. Like think Eric Morris versus Oregon. Cam Ward's first year where we were like running everything under the sun, like double reverse passes, end arounds, all that. So this is a big prove it week for Freund, because if it goes poorly for him this season, like he's not. I'm not going to call for his head, after 3 weeks, but like he's got to show something.
Like Jimmy said in his presser, it's not, he didn't say it's not the offense, or not the offensive calls, but Jackson was missing RPO reads. Yep. He should have handed off the ball instead of throwing it in certain situations and vice versa. So it's not just on the offense and the play call. It's also on the decision-making process.
And one thing too, you said you had some research in terms of maybe piling in some. We're done after this. Okay. Well, but
this is what I was getting to.
Hear,
so I did say, given the opponent result, there's a good argument to be made that the loss to North Texas was our worst in program history. And so the first thing I did, because I was writing a column off the game, was go back to that 2008 season and 69-0 against USC. Obviously,
could have been worse.
Could have been worse. Pete Carroll was kneeling in our red zone in the first half. And we had 2 quarterbacks at the time who were both, I think one had a fractured back and one had a fractured neck. So we could not call a pass. I think there were like, if you go back and see the box score, there were like 8 passes the whole game. We were running like end arounds with Brandon Gibson like every play. So that is right up there. We also lost that season 66-3 to Cal, I think in the second game. And it was fairly shocking because we had like kind of hung with Oklahoma State the week before in Wolf's first game. And so it was quickly really ugly. But, those were against pretty decent, teams back then when we were in the Pac-10. North Texas is a directional school. Kind of an afterthought in the state of Texas. No offense. I don't think they've never won 10 games, never challenged for like a big bowl game. I think Eric Morris has done an awesome job there.
Yeah.
But they're playing in like what looks, we're in Martin Stadium, which is not huge, but their stadium looks like it's as big as some high school stadiums in Texas.
There's probably high school stadiums that are bigger than that.
Yeah. And to go in there and just get our doors blown off where we physically, our offensive line kind of got dominated as well. And defensively, it didn't look like we had much of a clue on what was going on. I think it's number one for me. It really is. And if you want to take the 30,000 foot view and be really negative, like what's running through my head during that game is like, is this our new lot in life? With the Pac-12 collapsing a few years ago, and with us basically being relegated to Group of 5 status, going on the road now and losing to North Texas by 47 touchdowns, like it's a humbling experience. I don't know how to put a positive spin on anything at this point.
Yeah, I saw one thing that hurt me the other day, New Mexico and Coach Eck. I mean, I'm not going to talk anything about that, but what I will say was a graphic. They beat UCLA 35-10, and it goes New Mexico's last Power 4 win. And it wasn't WSU last season. So that's where we're at. And then you take a look at, our other Pac-2 school, Oregon State. They had kind of a buzz this offseason. You go out, you spend a couple $1 million on a Malik Murphy to come in and transfer and be your quarterback. And Bill Oram, I'm sure you read his story. And it was a poignant presser with him and Bray. Bray just didn't even answer his question if he likes being a head coach at the end. It does not, like, if you think things are going bad here right now, like, let's go over to Corvallis and check in, because things are not going well over there either. And they had a much better team on paper in terms of P4 transfers and retainment from their roster last season. So I'm not trying to get into that headspace, because it's tough to get out of that headspace, Adam, as a fan. But where the NIL constraints are compared to a school like Boise State coming in, I don't know how any other school not named Boise State is not running the Pac-12 from 2026 to 2031.
Yeah, I think when we first got relegated, there was some information circulating that we NIL wise we were like barely in the upper half of the Mountain West at that time when the Pac-12, or what we used to know as the Pac-12, collapsed. So, and I know we've done a lot to improve.
Yeah.
Since then, the Cougar Collective and those guys have really worked hard to at least make us competitive, but there's a long ways to go. And we're way behind Boise State, and we're behind Oregon State. I mean, they're paying more than $1 million for Malik Murphy. So yeah, it could be, unless something dramatically changes, unless we bring in a whale investor or find Boise State was
private equity.
Yeah, I don't know if that's the answer, but
gotta start drilling for oil.
Yeah, I covered private equity for a few years, while I was in the tech industry in Seattle, so I know all about it.
They want their money back, and very quickly.
Yeah, they're going to. Yeah, they're gonna make the return on their investment at any cost. So
now, pivoting to the Apple Cup, we're gonna start previewing this matchup. It's obviously going to be a very tough matchup in Pullman this weekend. Washington is currently favored -20.5. The over/under is 52.5. This is going to be a high-powered offense coming into Pullman. You have Damon Williams, we saw him briefly in the Apple Cup. He looks scary. The dual threat ability that he has. There's Jonah Coleman at the running back position, who I've seen on Heisman watch lists. You also have Denzel Boston, who is a wide receiver, something like 6'4", 200 plus pounds. So you have a high-powered offense coming in, and then go for it.
Yeah, don't forget about Buddha. He transferred out.
On the
He's making his return.
Yeah, what are your initial thoughts and what you've seen of UW so far? What is this team?
Yeah, I think one thing that held UW back last year in their first year in the Big Ten was their offensive line, and to a lesser extent their defensive line not really being able to hang with the upper echelon of that conference. And they've improved there on both sides. Unfortunately, they got the Hatchet brothers on the O-line, Washington kids. So they are going to be a really, really big test, and it will be. It'll be really interesting to see the game plan that Jimmy tries to cook up. I don't know if the talent disparity is so great where you're like running the play clock down to 5-4 seconds to try to shorten things, do the football version of Dick Bennett style.
I would.
Yeah, to keep them off the field. I will say I don't hate how our secondary matches up with their wide receiver core. Their freshman wideout, whose name is escaping me right now, was hurt against UC Davis. I don't think he'll play from what I've read. So, I could be eating my words here, but I feel like we may be okay in that matchup.
Desmond Roebuck?
Yep. But what really worries me, as somebody throughout my entire life who has watched Husky running backs just destroy us in the Apple Cup, from Jory Fogerson to Miles Gaskin, Corey Dillon. Yeah, I do not like the Jonah Coleman matchup against, Anthony Polano. Hopefully is coming back this week. He's flashed obviously in the first 2 games, but has not seen anything like a running back like him. And even Mohammed, their backup, is good. So, I think we're probably going to have to stack the box and then just let our secondary try to ball out and limit explosive plays. And obviously we can't turn the ball over like we did goes without saying, but if we, turn the ball over 2 or 3 times, it could get really ugly really fast. So,
and you mentioned the secondary. That is, I guess, where our identity is on defense. Colby Humphreys has really impressed me through the first 2-3 weeks. Tucker Large has had his moments. And then obviously, you bring back Jamori Colson, a guy that really made some noise in fall camp as a freshman, Trillian Sorrell. I guess the good thing about last week is he had 23 snaps over that game. So, and the one thing Jimmy said is hey, he is going to be using the 4-game rule. He is trying to get these younger freshmen involved on trips. What an opposing, stadium sounds like, what travel is like, and credit to him. I think that is very good coaching, especially when you're Washington State. Okay, how are you going to keep guys, mentally in this? And it's almost even a form of re-recruitment. Hey, you're going to come in here. We're going to give you 4 games. You're not just going to take a shirt and just, hey, you're a practice squad scout team player. If you play well enough, we're going to get you in with some sort of moments throughout the game. So I do like that aspect of him. But yeah, I totally agree with you, Adam. You're going to have to stack the box here. And you're going to have to rely on your secondary in man coverage to make some plays.
Yeah, and it's going to be a real test for the defensive line too. We've seen Bobby Terrell pop a little bit in the San Diego State game. And, we play a lot of defensive tackles. So we're going to be rotating guys in and out to try not to wear down going up against a Big Ten O-line. So, you could say this every week about football, that the game's won in the trenches, but we'll have to at least be respectable, I think, there to try to keep it close, or if we're going to have any real chance of keeping it close. So I'm interested. I'll be in my seats, hoping for the best on Saturday, while definitely preparing for the worst, I guess.
To add a correction from earlier, Desmond Roebuck is going to be playing. It is number 3 wideout Rashid Williams, who suffered a collarbone injury versus UC Davis, that will be out this game. And then just kind of adding to it, Jimmy Rogers also mentioned in his presser that UW has potentially 2 NFL ready running backs. You mentioned the depth 1 and 2 with Jonah Coleman and then Muhammad. But we got to get you out of here soon. Final question. This is actually a viewer submission that was sent in. So again, if you have any thoughts, questions, opinions, send us an email or a voicemail. But this question is, how important do you think this Apple Cup and all future Apple Cups are in preserving the rivalry? And from last year, we saw that UW didn't really care about the game the same way that we did. Obviously, their matchup with Oregon is kind of their rivalry game at the end of the year. How important is this Apple Cup? Does the Apple Cup even mean anything anymore?
Yeah, I think UW, you heard last year after they lost from a lot of UW fans, it was the game we didn't have the juice going into it, or it didn't have as much importance. And maybe that was true to some degree, but after you lose that type of game, I feel like that response is such a cop out. It's not even
without a doubt.
What a joke. You guys were trying. I was in the stadium last
year. Essentially a home game.
It was yeah, I was on the WSU side, and it was, there were 30% Husky fans on the WSU side, right in my ear, screaming, and I could tell you it meant something to those people. So, does it matter anymore? It doesn't matter as much as it used to, right? It's not a conference game. It's played in September. Is it still important? I think it is. obviously the East-West division in the state of Washington, the
Dude,
big school versus the small school. Like, I hope they keep playing it. I'm not optimistic that they will continue after the 5-year contract or whatever, however many years it was that they signed after the conference split. Especially the fact that Pat Chun will probably be negotiating. Like, if they're going to keep playing it, like, do we trust Pat Chun to keep the rivalry going? Like, public enemy number one for us in so many ways. So, I hope it's fun, it divides households. It's, I'm going to play City League basketball this week. Half my team's Huskies, half my team's Cougars. Will be pitching each other stuff. Hopefully we play as a cohesive team this week, but I'm not.
We'll be a little quiet leading into it, but after we might get loud.
Yeah. After, who knows? So I do hope. When the Huskies first left, I was like, let's be done with them. But, thinking about it more these last, couple of years, I would like to see it continue to be played, unless it's so horrifically lopsided that it's just like, a waste for everyone. But I would be very surprised if the Huskies would continue to visit to Pullman. So, like, these next two that are in Pullman could be the last two. Like, I'm just going to try to and live and do all the cliche things, but enjoy the moment. And
there will be beer in the stadium, though. I mean, that's one plus.
Yeah.
How many do you expect to take down?
That's the first time I've ever drank. It'll be the first time I've ever drank at Martin Stadium. So that'll be really so special.
One thing to kind of go ahead. Finish.
I was like, I predict I probably will not drink any Martin Stadium issued beers, because I'm very worried about the length of the lines and being able to see the game. And, like, I've heard some horror stories about the concessions this year. I haven't been to any games.
And you can't take it into the student section side. It's only on the general population side.
Okay. Well, then, yeah, I'm really screwed, because I'm section 25, right next to the students on the 30. So I feel like I'll be okay. I'll be able to get my hands on some.
I had one lasting thought too, just on that question. I mean, you take a look at the basketball side of things. Danny Sprinkle last year in his press conference, basically said, "Who is Washington State?" I didn't try to schedule this. This wasn't me. I could care less about the rivalry going forward. They only have this return trip, and basketball's, it's easy to schedule this. I mean, it is a quick trip for both schools. It's a very easy game to play. And I guess, going off of that aspect and the whole Chun thing, I mean, I interviewed Chun out in Omaha, 2 days before he lose Kyle Smith. I said, what's going on with Kyle Smith? Stanford's calling, blah, blah, blah. We'll see where life takes us. Well, life took him to UW 3 days later as well. So I wouldn't trust that man as far as I can throw him. And I can't really throw him that far, but we'll go from there. But Adam, really wanted to appreciate you jumping on. We'd love to get you on too here in the future this season. Hopefully there is a bowl opportunity for the Cougs this year, because we've got to get all the funds we can while there is still some Pac-12 bowl game allegiances. So Adam, one last thing before we get you out of here. What's your final score this weekend?
UW 42, WSU 24.
Connor?
37-21.
I got UW 35-10. Boy,
I can't argue. I can't argue with any of those predictions.
I can't wait for Duke Father to clip this and just laugh at us. But it is what it is.
Hey, at least we're realistic here.
Thank you, Adam. Go Cougs.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Go Cougs.
Appreciate it. Go Cougs. Folks, I lied. We do have a former player joining us this week, and it's a beast. It's MK. He's back with us. Mkristo, dude, man, I just want to keep it short and sweet with last week, but how bad was last week, and did that performance cloud this team's future this season for you in any way?
No, I was just talking to Alex Brink about the same thing. So I'm the biggest I won't say advocate of not ever having an excuse. I cannot stand when people have an excuse. And I think just breaking it down of understanding what happened in that game. If you guys have ever played in the South, played in Texas, it is hot, it's humid. If you're a West Coast person and you kind of go over towards the South or East Coast, it's different, right? So, whenever there's a bad game, bad games only get worse for a lot of people, for a lot of times. And you get a couple interceptions, a couple turnovers. You got a brand new team that was out there on the field doing everything they could. And I think it just got away from them and it got worse and steamrolled from there. But defensively, I think they did a great job. If you look at the score, it doesn't look like it. But, you get an interception, you're on a short field, you get a turnover, you're on a short field, and you're going out there, 3 times in a row without any breaks. Those legs are cooked. And once those legs go and the momentum swings and you got a visiting or a road trip game, it was curtains for them. So, I think this may be, if you look at it cup half full, this may be the best thing that could have happened to them going into a UW game where they're firing on all cylinders. Damon Williams is probably one of the best quarterbacks I've seen in this league in a long time with his feet. Jonah Coleman is basically the Genti of this new generation. And I've seen him play firsthand, and he's the real deal. So that thing steamrolled, and I think Jimmy Rogers is going to get them into the film room. They're going to unpeel some things, and I want to be a fly on the wall to see what that locker room feels like right now, because he's tearing butt right now. So
what do you make of the quarterback competition? Like, obviously, the damage was done in the first half. I can understand them getting tired throughout the game, but it's 42-3 heading into the locker room, largely because 5 turnovers in the first half. What do you take away from the QB competition that we have now heading into week 4?
Yeah, I mean, again, 75 new players, new coaching staff, new everything. They've never faced adversity like that before. 2 turnovers in a game. If you look at statistically, if you have, if you're down 2 turnovers, you're going to lose that game typically, right? There's a very, very high chance, maybe in the 90 percentiles, that you're going to lose that game. But, you got a new quarterback in there that had a couple turnovers, was it 3 picks, I think, in the first half. There's a couple fumbles. You lose that momentum. How does your team rally around that? Who's the leader? Who's the leader that's standing up? Last year we had a quarterback that, when he got into trouble, he could run the ball. He had a different phase of the game. He can do different things, but he also rallied that team, right? He was a leader. I don't see a vocal leader out there yet. Still early in the season. And I think that's one hard thing with the Zevi Eckhouse is you can look at him and say, okay, do you go with experience or do you go with someone who had a better camp in Potter, right? And I think that's going to be the controversy right now, is win right now versus build your team for next year, right? When you can see as a new coach, they can look at 2 different viewpoints with that. But I think personally, I'm high on Zevi. I think I've seen Zevi play. I've seen his flashes. I think he's got another dynamic with potentially running the football, which we're needing right now. But to have 3 picks in the first half is so tough, man. I just don't see how you come back from that.
Yeah, I look at it this week, man. I think you have to start Zevi Eckhouse, especially in the Apple Cup. I mean, this is a guy you brought back. Yeah, he engineered the only scoring drive. Granted, it's probably against 2nd and 3rd string defenders,
Sure.
But I liked what I saw in the amount of time that he played. Yeah, he missed a few intermediate throws, but I think you give him the start and you give him multiple drives to get something going, and then you go from there. That's my opinion.
Yeah, and again, I'm high on Zev. Like, I think Zev is the guy, right? He's got a couple other facets to his game that I don't think Potter has, and I think he's got a little bit more experience. I think he's a little bit older. But this is Jimmy's call, right? And hopefully that was the wake-up call to get Zev in there. I think about it as like, let's say that Zev started off the year. Are the games different? Are we still winning those games? Are we winning them by a larger margin? And I personally think yes. I think it's a different offense with Zev in there, and we win those first 2 games at a larger margin.
From a former player standpoint, what does this week mean to you? The Monday of the week, the every day of the week. Take us through a player's mindset, a guy that bleeds crimson and gray.
Yeah, I'll start with this. I think the hard part for me is, and this is not a knock on Jimmy, but Jimmy's never played an Apple Cup. Jimmy's not from Washington, so he doesn't know the significance of an Apple Cup, right? You have 75 new players. they don't know the significance of an Apple Cup. Someone like myself, I was born and raised in Seattle. I wore my Cougar gear to elementary school, on Apple Cup week. I had my school spirit on an Apple Cup week. I was always been a Coug fan since I was in elementary school. And then going to my very first Apple Cup and watching Jason Gesser terrorize the field, right? And things like that, I'll never forget. I had goosebumps running like all over my body the whole week as, Mike Price is setting up, a husky to get, torn apart at practice, a stuffed animal or just something fun like that, just getting everybody pumped up for the Apple Cup. I don't know how you get a brand new coach, brand new staff, brand new team to feel the same passion without ever actually having one. I think what it's going to take is them to run out on a sold out Martin Stadium on Saturday and hear the roar of the fans and see all the crimson and gray, and then you see all the purple and gold out there and just the boos and the cheers. I think that's going to get everybody fired up. The thing that we're going to need is that momentum to stay on our side for it to be a good game, because once that shifts over to that stupid siren, it's going to be different, right?
We talked about it last week. Do you know if there's any former players that are heading out and maybe in Pullman right now to share some war stories to the guys to help them understand what this means?
That I don't know. I don't know if any, Jack Thompson's just a great, advocate for Washington State football. He's the godfather of Washington State football. So Jack will probably be over there. I'm sure there'll be a ton of guys that come to the game. Unfortunately, I won't be there. I got a really good friend that's getting married on the Apple Cup, which is crazy.
Same, bro.
To me. It's crazy. So I told him, I was like, I'm going to have the game on while you're saying your vows. It's your fault for planning it on the Apple Cup. Good luck, bud. I still love you.
When we take a look at a game plan, defensively speaking, I just don't, with this rushing attack, I don't see how you don't stack the box with what might be your best part of your defense is your secondary and force them to beat you deep, huh?
This is a defensive coordinator's nightmare. A great running back and an absolutely phenomenal mobile quarterback. It is a nightmare. There's really, you're going to make a mistake every single time because you can block it perfectly. You can play defensively perfectly, go to everywhere, but Williams will make you miss. And then when you make one guy miss, you're done. And he's one of the fastest quarterbacks I've seen in a very long time. So defensively, yes, you're going to have to stack the box just because Jonah by himself is an absolute force. It's not going to, one guy's not taking him down. It's going to take 2 to 3 guys. The good news for Washington State is this is the best tackling team we've had in a long time. Right. So that I'm not necessarily worried about our defense. I think the defense is going to do well. What the deciding factor is going to be the offense scoring points. If the offense is getting 3 and outs, they're not scoring points, it's going to be a long day for the defense. And those 2 alone will wear our defense out. So it's going to come down to scoring points, controlling the clock, and getting it that way. Offensively, if we don't have an answer, there's no chance for Washington State to win this game.
Apple Cup this weekend, Saturday, 4:30 in Martin Stadium. It'll be exciting to see. Let's hope that Washington State can keep it close. Currently UW is favored by 20.5, so we'll see.
Hell of a spread.
Yeah, Mkristo, we'll enjoy the ceremonies as we're watching the Apple Cup on our phones at the dinner table. So, Mkristo Bruce, we always appreciate it. Thank you very much for jumping on by this week. A very busy man. He's making his media roll call today.
Well, I appreciate you guys, man. I love watching you guys. It's exciting to be a part of this. So thanks for having me on.
Go Cougs.
Thanks, MK.
Go Cougs.